Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our session. My name is Vijay Bangaru. I'm a product manager on Google Docs, and with me today I have one of my colleagues, Bidelman, who will also speak, and we also have a friend of ours, Tonkin from Memeo, who will also help you understand new ways that you can connect your enterprise applications with Google Docs and Sites. So before we jump into it, we have our usual live notes and questions are going to be at the wave, so pull that up, get your questions in there, and get them voted on. We'll address all of those at the end of the talk. So today we are talking about the Documents List API, which is the programmatic way for you to access your users' Google Documents. And how many people here have used the API or are somewhat familiar with it? All right, good, a pretty good bunch. And we're also going to talk about the Sites Data API, which again is a programmatic way to access Google Sites. And this is fairly new. It came out in September. And how many folks have used that one? Okay, good. So we got a good mix of people. And as you probably know, these are both part of the family of Google APIs, the GData APIs. So we're going to start with a little bit of an overview on those. So this is a common standard for Google. We have a ton of our applications offer this API, and it ranges in terms of offerings, right? In addition to the Docs and Sites ones, you have your YouTube one, you have your Analytics one, and so on. So there's a lot of great things here. The protocol itself is all based off of common standards and open protocols that we all know and love already. So you have your RESTful API with your get, post, put, delete for your full CRUD operations. You have the Atom publishing protocol. And we do extend it in a few ways. Most importantly, we're extending the authorization and versioning into that protocol so that that tricky stuff is just built into the standard already, and you guys don't have to waste your time building it. The protocol itself, of course, is XML-based, but we provide client libraries in just about every flavor you could want. And we find most of the developers are just using these libraries instead of speaking the protocol directly. And Memeo is a good example of this, and they'll talk about that in a little bit as well. And in addition to the libraries that you can find at code.google.com, we got the documentation and samples. So we hope we have it set up so you can hit the ground running on these APIs. So once you do have the APIs, you ask yourself, what can I build with them? And really the answer is pretty much anything. Especially with Docs and Sites, we try really hard to make it so that if you wanted, for whatever reason, you could rebuild our applications completely on the API. The same functionality you get in the app, you're going to be able to get in the API. So that means you can start building various mashups and stuff. And one I thought of this morning that I wish I had is, when I look at my week's calendar, and there's several meetings in there, I wish there was a button where it just auto-generated meeting notes and agendas and stuff for me. So it'll find my appointments, it'll find the contacts in there, it'll create a doc, set the title appropriate with the same name as the calendar invite, share it to everyone, and then we're done, right? And if that does it for my entire weeks of meetings, I just save 30, 40 minutes of work probably. And so that's a very simple case of things you can do combining these apps to provide nice experience for your users. So why Docs and Sites? You guys probably know this already, but when you get down to it in terms of a productivity suite that gives you collaboration and accessibility, this is one of the best. In terms of collaboration, we keep a single copy that is the master copy in the cloud, so you don't have to email versions back and forth. You don't have to worry about if you have the right version. All of that's going to be managed for you. And in terms of accessibility, it's in the cloud. If you can access the cloud, it doesn't matter which device you have. Doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter what time it is you have your content. And that, that simplifies even mundane decisions like when I'm about to get on the plane, which of these 7 laptops, tablets, iPads, and phones do I pick? It doesn't matter, they can all access it. So you just pick one and you're good to go. And you combine into that these are web applications. So the great thing about web applications is you have a really nice feature development cycle. We push features all the time. We push bug fixes all the time. The pace is much, much faster than a traditional client app. And then you add in the cost, and you put all those things together, including the low cost. We're finding a ton of users are gravitating here. More are coming each day. So as developers, this is a great platform for you guys to develop on to capture some of these users. So we'll jump into a bit on the Documents List API itself. Last year when we were here, we announced a bunch of features. We had folder management, sharing, some more metadata, some export capabilities, advanced queries. And in that year, we've been really busy. And a big milestone we had was version 3.0, which came out in September. So in addition to features and bug fixes, we added speed for both you, the developer, and we also did refactoring for ourselves to make it easier to launch more features. And this should be apparent, hopefully, as I walk through some of these slides. So 3.0, this was in September. Some of the headline features here is additional support for people writing sync clients. And when Matt's up here, he'll tell you all about that. The ability to upload and download PDFs. We have, and so those are some of the features, including shared folders. And in terms of sort of bug fixes and rounding out the corners, you used to just be able to move a document to the trash in the API. You couldn't actually, get it out of the trash can and away for good. So we added permanently deleting documents. And then, nicest feature there, speed, 40% faster. So we're very proud of that. But we didn't really rest on that. So since then, we've added a bunch of more stuff, and we're going to go into a lot of these details. We added OCR, we added translations, we added resumable uploads, so you can upload large files to the cloud, and then the ability to store those files there. So upload any file, which is one of our headline features. So before we go into the details on those features, we should talk about where the magic happens. And the magic for this API all happens at the feeds level. So docs.google.com/feeds. And basically, we have a set of feeds that will give you different bits of functionality, and it's all pretty straightforward. So the main feed is going to let you create, fetch, update all your documents. Your basic CRUD operations are there. The ACL feed is just like it sounds like. This is going to let you do all the sharing operations that you'd like to do. The media feed lets you update the document's content. The revisions feed, surprisingly enough, it lets you access the revisions. So, pretty straightforward stuff here. Foldering stuff's going to let you folder. The export feed is going to let you point at a particular item and export it in the format that the user wants. So we have a variety of formats for each of those types. And the metadata feed is going to give you information on what features are enabled for that user. And Eric's going to go into detail on that one in a little bit. So jumping into the advanced features, first one I wanted to talk about is document translation. So when you're uploading a document, you can specify source language and target language, and we're going to translate it. So the copy you get on the server is going to be the translated version. If you choose, you can just omit the source language, and in most cases we can detect it. In the rare case we can't, we throw an error, and of course this is all documented up on code.google.com. And not every source target pair is supported today, so I think if you're trying Estonian to simplify Chinese, you might be out of luck for now, but we're working on that. Next one, upload any file. So this is one of my favorite features, which we launched back in January. And in a way, this is a natural progression for Google Docs. We started with having our own native formats for documents, spreadsheets, presentations, and we added the ability to upload and download PDFs, and we added shared folders. And we found in our internal use and talking to customers and developers that a lot of people have built their entire team collaboration around the shared folder. All the stuff for the project is there, and then they're running into hurdles. So we talked to an architect who said, look, all my plans and stuff are there, but I have pictures of the build site. It'd be really nice if I could put those pictures there. And we talked to people who are in mixed deployment setups where half the company uses Google Docs and some are still using Microsoft Office. And they're like, look, I got this sales deck. It's our master sales deck. It's 90 megs. No one wants to touch it anymore. We'd really like to just put it up there and be done. And so to support those scenarios, we said, yeah, that makes sense. Let's make it so you can host files up in the cloud. And like I said, we did that in January, and we've gotten great usage. And the usage falls into 3 models. And this gets interesting when you start thinking about what kind of apps you want to build. First is the simple collaborative model, where previously with your team, you'd email the document back and forth and edit it and have to keep it in sync, and someone's working on the old version and everything gets complicated. That's kind of gone out the window now. People are just uploading it into the cloud. There's one place. It's always up to date. The other thing is non-collaborative. So it's just me, and I'm thinking, man, I'd really like to work on this file when I get home. So I email it to myself and then access my email. Well, that's just kind of stupid. The other case is, you know, I have files I'm worried about losing, so I stick them on a thumb drive or I email it to myself as the backup just in case, which again is silly, right? Upload it to the cloud, you're done. That's what we kind of built this for. The third case we're seeing is a lot of developers like you guys building synchronization clients, which are syncing my cloud content to my PC, to multiple PCs, to different devices. And Matt's going to go into that use case quite a bit. We found that's a very compelling use case. Some details on this. So while you are uploading, normally things are uploaded, they get converted to Google Docs format. If you specify the convert equals false flag, we're just going to upload it as is, so the exact ones and zeros you give us, we'll give back. These files do take up quota, so it's not free storage. And there's a few limitations. One of those is the API access for this is for the Premier customers only. The max file size is 1 gigabyte, and everyone gets 1 gig free quota, and beyond that, you can pay more at fairly reasonable rates. Next feature I want to talk about is OCR. So this is the same idea. It's a feature flag on upload. If you're uploading a photo and you want to extract the text, you can call this option, and it's a simple, in the post URI, you say OCR equals true. And instead of giving you a photo on the server side, we're going to give you a Google document with the extracted text. There's some there's some limitations here. First, you know, OCR is fairly expensive to do, so it does take a while, and you want to program around that constraint. In general, OCR is garbage in, garbage out, so the better quality image with the more readable characters, the better your results will be. For now, this works only with the Latin character set, and it is an experimental feature, so we do have it throttled a bit, but your paying apps users have a much higher throttle point, so we don't expect to see any problems there. So for this one, I'll do a quick demo on this, and this is up on the code samples page as well. So I pulled up the demo page, and I'll go through my usual sign-in process. And yep, I'll grant access. Okay, and so now I will choose a file, and if you want to play with this, we actually have the file right here for you, so you can download it and try it out. Pull that up, okay, and we'll say start. And so like I said, it's going to take a little bit of time because it is an expensive operation, but I think you can see some of the neat things you can build around this. If you were, for example, building an expense report system, you can set it up so that people can just scan their receipts. You can extract the text and toss it into the program for you. So here you see what we pulled out. It's pretty good if you compare the photo and what came out, and it even calls out places specifically where it was unable to find or figure out what it was. So we think that'll be really useful as you build some of these apps. And with that, I'm actually going to hand it over to Eric. He's going to walk you through more of these features, and then we'll call up Matt, and he's going to go into some details on Memeo. So, Eric?
Thank you, Vijay. Great, so some more advanced features for V3 of the API. One thing that we launched in regards to the arbitrary file upload that happened in January was a metadata feed. And this really came out of third-party requests from our developers. They wanted to be able to determine what type of count a user was using. As Vijay mentioned, the upload any file is restricted, at least in regards to the API, to apps Premier accounts. And we didn't really have a great way to determine that, but what we launched recently is a metadata feed, and it's read-only. And what you get back, you can see it's fairly simple. You send a post request to the metadata feed URI. It's a private feed, so you're going to include an authorization header and then a version number. So we're talking to version 3 of the API with that GData version header. And what you get back is just an entry with a bunch of metadata and properties and features of the account. So there's things like quota bytes used, how much quota is it taking up. There's the OCR rate limiting. This particular account that made this request, you can tell is a Premier account because it has the upload any feature name set. And then you get other properties such as the upload size for each type of document. There's also, what's not pictured here, is the export formats for each document. So as you know, Google Docs allows you to export documents and spreadsheets into different formats, PDFs, Microsoft Word formats. So very useful for customize a client UI based on the feature set that's making that call. Another great feature and very useful feature, if you're going to upload gigabyte files to Google Docs, you're going to need a reliable upload method. So there's the 250 megabyte limit on the normal upload path if you ever used the API before. But what we actually launched recently was a Resumable upload protocol for the Google Data APIs. So right now, the YouTube API and the Google Doc List API implement this. And this is just a more reliable, more robust feature for uploading large amounts of files. And what your client does is actually make a post request saying, I want to start this process. And then you get back a URI to upload chunks of a file to. So you can upload a megabyte at a time. You can upload 10 megabytes at a time. It's really up to you and your client. And I'll lastly just say that the client library support for this is really great. So we actually implemented this in all the client libraries, so you don't have to go into the raw protocol itself. But let's just take a look and see what that looks like. So bare bones, the raw protocol, the GData protocol for this is you make a post request. You say, I want to start this process to the create session URI. We'll include the version header and the authorization header. And then the 2 or 3 important parts of this particular request here are the X upload content type and the X upload content length. So this is the file. We're going to create a zip file in Google Docs. And we'll tell it the file size and the application type. And then the title of the file will be my title when it's done uploading. So like I said, what you get back is this unique location. It's a token-based session URI that you're going to send the chunks of the file to. So you'll make multiple put requests to this URI. You'll send the content type just so the server knows you're still talking about a zip file. And the important bit of this is the content range. So this is the first 10,000 bytes of this zip file. And then, of course, the body is the 10,000 bytes that you're talking about of the file. You'll keep doing that. The server will respond with a 308. It'll tell you it's not complete. It'll tell you the content length and the range that it knows about. So maybe just because you sent the first 10,000 bytes doesn't mean the server actually processed that. So you want to continue the file with the range header that you get back. And so what you get back eventually, when the file's all done, you've uploaded the total file, you'll get back a 201 created with the atom entry, the title, and the quota bytes used. There is quota bytes used in this case because it's a zip file, it's an arbitrary file. If it was just a regular doc file that we converted, that would be set to 0. Okay, so that's the protocol, but everything's easier in Python if you're a Python fan. So let's dive in this a little bit. This is what this looks like. I mentioned client library support. So the first thing you're going to want to do is, of course, import the Google Data Docs client library, both the client and the data portions of that. And the process is really the same for all the client libraries. You'll create a Docs client, and you'll pass in your application's name. You'll need to authenticate and authorize this app to share data with Docs. So you either use OAuth or authsub for that. And I left that as a to-do. And then we'll do some file I/O. So we'll read in an MPEG file. We'll get the file size information from the operating system. And then the client library provides this really nice, robust, resumable uploader object. So you're going to create that, pass in the client and file handle. We'll tell it the MIME type. We'll tell it the file size. This has a nice property, so you can set the chunk size. So this is the content range bytes that I was explaining before. And then the desired class is just the type of atom entry, the GData atom entry that we're expecting. So we're talking to the Doc List API. You'll expect a Google Docs entry. If you're talking to YouTube, you would expect a YouTube entry. And then the next thing we do is we can set the title via the atom title, and then call the uploader.upload file method. And really in the background, all this is doing is it's making that initial post request that you saw in the previous couple slides. You're passing in the entry, and it'll literally just, in a for loop, make those put requests and chunk the file up into different pieces based on your chunk size there. So about 15 lines of Python to get the resumable upload protocol within your application. Really simple, but really robust, and definitely the way to go if you're uploading large files to Docs. Lastly, I just printed out the title and the quota used for that file. So next, I'd like to invite up Matt Tonkin from Memeo, who has some really great real-world experience implementing some of these protocols, and he can tell you some challenges and some tips and tricks.
Thanks, Eric. So what we've heard about is the ability to be able to upload arbitrary files to Google Docs. Now, that's a great feature, but you can't edit all those files online. There simply aren't the online editors for it. So Memeo Connect we designed as being the bridge between that storage that's available in Google Docs and your desktop software. So if you drag and drop a Photoshop file over into Memeo Connect, you can edit it in Photoshop locally. And when you edit it, those edits are then pushed up online. and if something's been edited by somebody else and they've shared it with you, that gets taken down from online and synced back to your client. So it's available for Windows and for Mac, and we have an iPad reader as well. But the big challenge for us was sync. It's not just about getting documents up into the cloud and bringing documents back down again. You have to know when to do that. As soon as there's an edit locally in the document, what we need to do is then go and upload that and replace the document, and then download, if somebody has edited the document, like I said, download it back to the client again. Now, in Google Docs, there's no set way to be able to handle conflicts, and there is the potential for conflicts. And the last thing you really want to do is lose users' data, because they tend to not like that very much at all. But it comes down to how it is that you're going to deal with it. That's a challenge for your application, to be able to figure out how you're going to handle conflicts in the context of your app. A lot of the solutions that we used are really pretty straight out of the box as far as the API is concerned. E-tags. So e-tags are like a little string that's attached to a document, and that e-tag will change. It'll cycle, do its thing, change every time there's a change on the document. So if there's any metadata changes, if there's a title change, if it gets starred, if there's an ACL change, your e-tag will always change. But the thing that doesn't change is the updated date. The updated date will only ever change when the actual content of the document changes. So between those things, you can pretty much figure out, okay, when do I actually need to download the file again, and when I just need to go and update the metadata for the file. The document feeds, when we talk to the API, the document feeds pretty much just give us a list of documents that we have available in Google Docs. But that list is growing, and it's growing at a very, very rapid rate, thanks to things like arbitrary file upload. Thankfully, it's the document feed API is a rich querying language. So we can specify parameters and get back just a list of matching documents. And that's really quite powerful, because what we can do is say, okay, we're going to just look at the documents that have been changed since a particular date. So since we last went and refreshed our document feed, let's just grab those changes and bring that down to our client. So a few tips and tricks, a few things that we learnt while we were developing Memeo Connect. One is that Google Docs is not intended to be a file hierarchy. It's really a document library, much like iTunes is a library for your music. Folders are like playlists, they're virtual entities. So an individual file or document can exist in multiple folders. The problem there is that basically it doesn't map to a local file system. You can't just sort of go, okay, we're going to take this and we're going to mirror this online. We're going to take this old file system, mirror it online. It just doesn't work that way. And basically you shouldn't try and force it to do that. I mean, you can look at your cat and expect it to bark, but it just ain't going to bark. And it's just not there to be a hierarchical file system. It's just not. The next thing is list size. We had a customer who, originally, like back when we first launched the client, said, okay, great, we've got this arbitrary file storage. I'm going to grab my whole life and upload it. So, like 6 gig and 4,500 files. And I got, 85% of the way through and had a bit of a hiccup. And we all thought, gee, that's really good. We did really well on that one. But, ultimately, it just means that people are uploading more and more files. Now that they can upload arbitrary files, the list of these, the documents list is getting much, much larger. And it can take some time to go and get that initial feed of the documents. So optimizing the list size is, optimizing your feed requests is really important. So just bring down, figure out what queries you need to do to bring down the smallest feed possible. Persistence was a big one for us as well. If you do have a large number of documents, you really want your client to launch quickly. So again, that comes down to optimizing your feed requests. But if you can persist all that information, persist it. So the next time you go and launch your application, the thing's going to launch quickly, because there is a bit of a delay as it's updating the documents list. This part was get lazy. your users generally don't need to know everything that exists via the APIs. And get lazy is really just lazy load the things that you don't need. You know, these servers, they respond pretty quickly, but well, they respond very, very quickly, but if you don't need it at startup, then just grab it when you need it. So a user clicks on a file, then just go and update the stuff that you need in your GUI at the time. Flexibility was a big one for us as well. We found that there just simply isn't a standard Google Docs user. No two Google Docs users are the same from what we can tell. Some people have 10 documents, some people have 10,000 documents. Some people want to see everything, some people just want to search. Some people want to share everything, some people don't share anything at all. So the trick is there just to never assume that you know how a user is going to use it. I mean, we even found this internally with Google. In the feedback we got, some groups are, oh look, we really love this feature, and some other groups said, oh, we really love this feature. And we even found that within Google, they don't use the Google Docs in the same way. And now with this arbitrary file upload, we can expect a lot more aggressive usage of arbitrary files in the future. So, you know, you might be using the Google Docs list for some purpose, but that user might have thousands and thousands and thousands of files. So it's something to be aware of. Informative UI, whilst there's some lag in dealing with the servers, it's not, you know, these things aren't local. So these server interactions can take some time. And it's good to keep your users informed. You know, it's really important to have, for a great user experience, to keep your users informed. So, you know, if you're updating a feed, if you're downloading a document, if you're uploading a document, keep the users informed all of the time. And the last point is client libraries rock. The client libraries, I mean, for us, what we used mainly was the .NET and Objective-C client libraries. And they're essentially object-oriented wrappers for all the things that exist in Google Online. And they're wrappers, meaning that you then don't have to write all that code. You know, the client libraries gave us a really, really advanced starting point. And one of the great things that we found in doing both our Mac client and our iPad client is that, you know, there's this underlying library that goes between those two platforms. So we were able to write an engine, a Memeo Connect engine that sits on top of that, and we're able to bring that from, you know, when we launched Memeo Connect for Mac, then the iPad came out. We thought, oh, great. Because it's written on the same library, we just picked up the same code base, brought it across to the iPad, and we had an application up and running in a very, very short period of time. So the client libraries we found have been really great, and, you know, really, really good support for the doc list. A couple of other points is that this stuff was really built for the web, not so much for the desktop. And throughout the course of development, we did have a few challenges. We went back to Google a few times, and we really found that the API team was very, very responsive. Particularly when you're talking about, you know, sometimes you think you open a bug online, what happens to it? It goes into nowhere. Well, it certainly doesn't go into nowhere. It exists, and we found that the Google Docs list team, very, very responsive. And the rules are there, if you don't ask, you won't get. So ask. In fact, a lot of things that, you know, that we've seen come out have been from, you know, we really push it and have asked for a lot of new features and found them to be very responsive. So where we're at today, really, and this is the call to action, is that you can now store arbitrary files in Google Docs. You can store any file you want in Google Docs. And that's a pretty powerful feature. So Memeo Connect is just the way that we have chosen to use that API. I mean, you guys are developers, and essentially now, I mean, this is arbitrary file storage in the cloud. So the world is really your oyster in that sense. You've got to look at what your applications are and how you can make use of this API. It's very flexible, and there's a lot you can do with it. And to close off, we will be launching Memeo Connect 2 in beta form quite shortly. And that has a #1 most requested feature, which is some integration into the OS. So, you know, we see essentially a drive that's for Google Docs, and we can drag and drop things into it and out of it and open it. It's going to be a closed beta to start with. So if you want to get hold of this software and help us to squash out some of the final bugs, you can go to memeoconnect.com/beta. All right, back to Eric.
Great, so thank you, Matt. Let me get a drink. So before we jump into, sort of switch gears and talk about the Sites API a little bit, I just want to show you, Memeo is a great example of a desktop client that talks to the API. But I'd like to show you what a third-party developer did, and he came to me in the forums. In his spare time, he's used the Java client library, he's used Google Web Toolkit and App Engine to create a really interesting use case for the docklist API. So Vijay mentioned that this API and gave you some of the features, that it's very full-fledged. Let me just sign into App Engine. He mentioned it's very full-fledged, and you can literally rebuild Google Docs on top of the API itself. And this is what this gentleman has done. So you can tell if you ever used Google Docs before, I'm sure the majority of you have, that this looks and feels exactly like Google Docs. He's customized the UI, he's added widgets, Google Web Toolkit widgets. You can have operations like save, you can create new documents, you can delete documents, the revision history, everything available in the API as you'd expect. But the really cool integration here is that he's created a latex or LaTeX, depending on where you're from, compiler. So he's using Google Docs as a storage platform for his application. So I can make edits in his application, and just to show you this works, it does compile the LaTeX file here. But if I save this and open my Google Docs, it's using Docs as a repository for his data. So there's his file. It's in Google Docs. I can come in here as a different user, maybe share this further with somebody else. They can make changes, and then his application will pick that up. So just a really interesting use case. If you take anything away from this, it's that the API is extremely full-featured, and you can literally rewrite Docs or a different use case for your application. Great. So switching gears a little bit, I'd like to dive into the Sites API. But before we do that, here's the bit.ly URL for the Google Wave. If you do have any questions on either API or anything that we're talking about, questions for Memeo as well, please do fill those out. So the Sites API, how many people have ever used Google Sites before? Just so, great, awesome. So the API itself has full access to a Google site. This is something we launched back in September with all these features. It's very robust. So you can create, modify, move, delete all content in a site. And we'll take a look at what that means in a second. Similar to the docklist API, it's got the very similar features. So you can have sharing permissions. You can share further with the site, or different attachments, arbitrary file uploads for sites, file cabinets, or attachments to pages as well. There's revision history and activity streams, so you can actually audit who's doing what and what they're changing on a Google site. You can create and provision new sites if you're a Google Apps user. You can copy them from an existing site, so you don't have to start from scratch. There's other features, more advanced features, page-level templates, there's site-level templates, web address mappings. This is really cool if you want to map a subdomain, an actual subdomain you have on your account, to a Google site, and it looks very seamless, right? You couldn't even tell that it was a Google site. A couple more things, gadgets. This is a data API that we'll talk about today, but there's also gadgets. So you can have an iGoogle gadget. You can have a Sites itself is a gadget container, so you can run a gadget that talks to the Sites API or does something interesting for your users. And there's also Google Apps scripts. So this is something, it's JavaScript that's run on the server side within Google spreadsheets that you can use to interact with Google Sites. So a use case there might be you have a Google spreadsheet with a bunch of usernames and a list of data, and you could, with one click, import that into a Google site, into a Google list page. So just as Vijay pointed out for the data API for the doc list, all the magic happens at sites.google.com/feeds. So a couple feeds worth mentioning are the site feed itself. This is how you're going to create sites. This is how you're going to copy sites and modify the titles and URLs for a site. There's the content feed. So you're going to be creating content, different types of pages and sites. It all happens at the content feed level. There's full CRUD for that. The two parameters here are domain and site name. The domain is your Google Apps domain, or literally the string site if you're on just a regular Google account. Site name is the URL web space name of the site, as you would see in the browser if you opened up a site. ACL feed, very similar to Google Docs, right? You're going to be sharing at the site level now, hopefully the page level eventually. Activity feed I mentioned, this is read-only. The revision feed, same as the Google Docs API. So just a ton of stuff there. So content, what kind of content, just so we're all on the same page, what am I talking about here? Well, this is a public site that I set up prior to the presentation. You can feel free to visit it. But this is an example of a web page in Google Sites. So there you have access to the HTML of the page. There's the attachments at the page level. You can add comments, change comments. The activity stream, this is how it manifests itself within the Google Sites UI. And that maps to the the activity feed in the API. But there's not just web pages, right? There's list pages, so tabular and arbitrary stored structured data. There's announcement pages. There's file cabinet pages where you can upload arbitrary files in a section of a certain site. So in order to do this, we'll take a look at a Java example. Creating content is very simple. So the first thing, just with the resumable upload example, you're going to be creating a site service object to talk to the site's API. And we'll need to use OAuth or OSSUB to authorize that access, because we're actually writing data. And the first thing you can do is create a skeleton function. So we'll make a create web page function that takes a string for the title of the page, and we'll take an HTML string for the body, the HTML content of that page. And what we're expecting back is a web page entry. This is something, if you ever use the Java library, that you're very familiar with. So the process for all these different types of pages and content is the same. We'll create a blank object, in this case a web page entry object, to store our data and create in Google Site. We'll set an XML blob. We'll set the content and the title on the entry, the Atom entry. And then lastly, it's just a matter of calling the client insert method. This will create that post request and actually upload the entry to the content feed URI there. And for this public site, in my example, this is the content feed URI. So fairly straightforward. Great. So once you create content, you're going to want to be able to fetch it. And the site's API itself has a really robust query structured language. So you can imagine using the kind parameter, getting at just web pages. If I want to get at web pages and list page entries, absolutely possible. If you know the URL of a site, you can use the path parameter to drill down into that actual entry itself. The parent parameter can be used for fetching children of a certain page. So you have a list of files in a file cabinet. You can get at all those entries. And then just lastly, there's metadata properties for all of these. So if you mark an entry or an announcement or comment as draft, or if it's a deleted entry, you can include those as part of your query. So once you have content in, it's absolutely your data. You can get it out in any way, shape, or form. So in Java, this is pretty straightforward as well. We're still talking the content feed URI, and I just changed the URI to include the kind parameter, so we'll get at the file cabinet pages and list pages on a site. We'll call the get feed with that URI and expect the content feedback. And then we'll loop through and print out the file cabinet entries, and we'll print out the list page entries that are returned to us from that query. Certain content types are absolutely going to have different metadata properties. So for example, the list page entries there have the column name and the column index, so we can just print those out as well, looping through the column items. So instead of throwing more code at you, I kind of want to just demonstrate on how easy and quick it is to create a Google site from scratch. So what we can do is actually, I'll fire up Eclipse. And even before I do that, I'll just show you. This is a test domain, app.testdomain.com, that I'm going to be using. Like I said, creating sites is only something you can do with an apps domain at this point. So I have 3 test sites here. Let's go ahead and create a new one from scratch. It'll be kind of boring at first. We'll change the theme. We'll add some users. We'll share and collaborate the site. We'll make it public. We'll share it to the domain and make it public. And then add a bunch of content and upload some files. So I have some helper logic here, and I'll scroll in for you guys. That sets all this up. You know, I read into a bunch of command line options. Basically, I'm setting up an OSSUB token. I'm setting the domain and site name that I'm going to be talking to via the command line. I have a couple methods here to build the content feed URI and the site feed URI to pull the site data. But if I scroll down here to this section, this is actually where we can create a site. So just as in creating a web page entry, you're going to want to start off with a blank site entry. We can set a title for the site, a summary, a description. The site name itself is the URL we want it to appear under. And then we'll make that post request using the insert method, just as we did with creating the web page content. It's going to be boring at first, so the next thing I can do is, after the server returns this new site entry here to me, I can call the update method. I can set a theme and call the update method, which will make a put request and change that theme of the site. So let's just see what this looks like. So we'll go ahead and authenticate. I'm just setting an auth sub token that I've set up prior to the show. So we create a site. If I hit return, I can change the theme, make it a little more interesting. So if I refresh my list of sites, I should be, so this is the title of the presentation. So there you go. We created a new site from scratch, a few lines of code, and I actually changed the theme. So before it was just a cookie cutter blank theme, and we made it a little more interesting. Let's just go to show you what it looks like to add certain people and share this outside of our domain and make this site public. So by default, Sites has this set up. This is the permissions associated with this site. So we can add everyone at apps test domain to be a collaborator in the site, and we can also make the site public so you and the audience can actually view the site after I finish that process. So that code is very straightforward. Here we're recreating an ACL entry, and to share it with the domain, we'll use the ACL type scope for the domain and pass in the apps test domain as our value for that right here. We'll set the role as writer to mean collaborator. We'll set a link. We'll call the ACL link and call insert on that, which is the site ACL link for that particular entry. To make the site public is very similar. So instead of using the domain type, we'll use the default type, meaning everyone, and we'll add them as readers and call insert. So we'll press enter a couple times, and the site should now be public. So if I refresh this, indeed those settings have changed. So if you actually want to visit this site, it's sites.google.com/a/appstestdomain.com, Google.io 2010 in the URL here. So that's great. Well, I don't want to work on this myself. I've added collaborators. Let's actually add some content. Right now, I have the home page by default. So to do that, I can use the same process as you saw on the slides. I'll create web page entry. I'll create a comment on the page. And the important note here for the comment is that the web page is going to be the parent element for that page. So we need to include the link. You can see the sites link, rel parent. Let me call that out here. So this is setting an atom link telling, yes, I want this web page to be the parent page of this comment, and that'll make it a child of that page. Again, we'll call insert, and then we'll create a file cabinet as well. Last thing I can do is just jump ahead. We'll create a couple attachments. I'll actually upload this presentation, PDF version of this presentation, and all the code snippets you saw in the presentation to this. And I did share it publicly, so you should be able to access that. I'll just read a file of a directory of files, and create a couple attachment entries, setting the media source to that file and media type, set it as summary and description, and the parent. So we'll do that real quick. Comments posted, file cabinets created. Moving the page to be a sub-page of the web page. I'll upload a bunch of attachments. So you can see I have a new web page here. I set the title and the content. The blink tag doesn't work in sites. Oh well, nobody likes the blink tag anyway. I posted a comment, created a subpage with a file cabinet page. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like my attachments are being uploaded, but I'll definitely get those up there because they do have the code snippets for all the presentation. There they go, one by one. So there's the example of just uploading a single file to a file cabinet. So if you take anything away from that, it's that it's very, very easy to work with the Site State API, and you really have access to all the content within a Google site. So I think now I'm going to throw back to Vijay, who's going to wrap things up for us, and we'll take questions after that.
Great, thanks, Eric. So I asked this sort of at the beginning of the talk, what can you build with them? And so we're going to revisit that. And hopefully you've seen with the APIs that you can build really rich, compelling experiences for your users that'll hopefully delight them and make you guys some money. There's some more things we want to do in the near future to make this better. We want to make it a richer platform for both the developer and the user. So the first thing we're looking into is better integration with the apps marketplace. Of course, today you guys can put your apps in the marketplace and they're there. Domain admins can find them and install them and all of that. But we want to go a bit further. We want it so the app you write its file content, whatever data it stores, that state is visible in the user's doc list, right? And then from there they can access it and give you more hooks like that. And so a screenshot example of one thing we're thinking of is when a user goes into his doc list and he sees your type, in the context menu there's a new open with feature, and he's going to see all the applications installed to his domain that are eligible to edit that MIME type, whether it's a fax service, your own editor, or a converter service. And then if he goes to more, he can go to the apps marketplace and see what else is available. So we're hoping with apps marketplace and some UI integrations like this, there's going to be some really nice things for you guys moving forward. And on the topic of moving forward, where is this going? We're hoping that with your help, we can build a platform where users' documents and files, they just never leave the cloud. End to end, that's where they are, because you can create them there, you can edit them, you can collaborate on them, you can store them and share them. It's all in the cloud. And then you add in the access from anywhere and you're kind of set. And if we build this platform correctly, anyone can play in the cloud. So all the new web apps you guys write, all the new client apps that you guys write, those are all available. And it's not just new stuff, it's the legacy stuff that we can together bring all the legacy stuff into the present. So if you look at something like Memeo Connect, that's a great way to turn Windows XP into knowing about the cloud. Right? It brings stuff that doesn't even know about it, doesn't even get the cloud into the future where we are. And same with at the application level. If you look at an application like Docverse, which is a company we recently acquired, it's an application that turns Office 2003 into a web compliant app, so that those files, as you're editing them in Office 2003, they're stored up in Google Docs and they're shared in Google Docs and it's available to everyone. So that's a platform we want to build, and a key component of this platform is sharing. We know sharing is key, and people want good collaboration. That's something we're committed to. And then in general, Google Docs and Sites, these are web apps. We're innovating as fast as we can, and hopefully you saw that with just the API progression in 1 year. We're committed to this. We want this to work, and with your help, we can make some great things here. And specifically with Google Sites, we do have a lot of more stuff coming here also in terms of workspaces. Two things people have asked for, and it makes lots of sense and we're going after, is a publishing workflow. So if you want workflow in your workspace, that's something we're going to support. We also want deeper integration with the core Docs product, because there's always been this weird division. We want to get away with that so it just makes sense as one core suite. Additionally, we're going to do more themes, more extensibility. There's going to be some great stuff coming in this space. So with that, I want to move to your guys' questions. So we have 2 microphones here. They're like within 10 feet of each other. I don't know why we need 2, but we got them. We also have the questions up on the Google Wave. So go up there and take a look at the questions, vote up the ones that you think are good, and we'll address them. And I want Eric and Matt to come up and join me, and we're also going to have Scott Johnston, who's our special guest
star,
is the PM of Google Sites, so he'll be able to answer stuff as well. Before we go to questions, though, quick mention of resources. Everything you'd want, code.google.com. I think you guys know the links, and of course the samples are at the samples page.
Yep.
Eric's going to pull up the wave so we can take questions off of there, and we'll start with the first question from the mic.
Hi, my company in the Netherlands uses a lot of XML, and I was wondering whether we could use Google Docs to upload XML, and that Google Docs validates it against an XSD, and we would really like to have the option that when a user clicks their XML document that we uploaded into the Google Docs, to be able to automatically open it with our app. So what about the XML? Would it be available in Google Docs, or is it not something that Google
so
wants?
the XML file today, of course, you can upload and store with us. And some of the integration points that we're trying to work on with Apps Marketplace and third-party apps would support that exactly, where a user could register your app as the app that opens XML types in Google Docs. And every time they click on that, your app is launched.
So, but is it already possible to upload XML and that Google Doc recognizes it as XML, or is it just like the
So you can,
LaTeX example?
So you can go ahead and upload the file, and it's going to show up there as filename.xml. For the files today, we don't do any type-specific activities, so the user will see .xml in their UI. We don't do any special things yet for that type.
Okay, are you planning to?
We want to, and we're hoping this third-party integration is going to help us do a lot of that stuff.
Thanks.
Okay, let's take the next one from the mic.
I work with the spreadsheet feeds, and I have everything working. I can pull in the content of cells from a spreadsheet. However, it was mentioned that different docs users use the different tools differently. The formatting within spreadsheets is something that users use a lot to communicate information. And right now, I'm not able to read the formatting of each cell off of the API. Is there any plan to introduce that into the Spreadsheets API?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the second half. A plan to do what specifically?
I'm unable to read the formatting. For example, the cell shading or underlining from the API.
Yeah. So that's a very reasonable feature request, and I personally don't know what's in the pipe, but it seems like something that should be.
I think at this point, the Spreadsheets API itself is more about getting at the data and querying for your data. As far as it's the same thing with the doc list API, so it's more about file management instead of actually getting in and editing a Google Doc. But absolutely a great feature request that we should consider.
Okay, so the first question off the Dory, are there any plans to expose Google Drawing through the APIs right now? There isn't, and I think it's basically the same answer. It's something we definitely need to do, and we hope to address.
Yeah, I would just say that as features come available in Google Docs, we'd like to have them in the API at one point or another. For a good example is the OCR feature, which is something available in the API but not in Docs. Folder sharing came to the API before it was in Docs, so there's this different back and forth that happens. But yeah, we do like to keep those up to speed, and we'll definitely, as users prioritize that in our issue tracker, we'll take a look.
Question related to the OCR piece of the docs. Any plans to include something like forms processing, that only certain parts of the docs can be scanned, or the images that are being uploaded, rather than the whole image being OCR?
That's a good idea. So we'll definitely get that feedback back to the forums team. Yeah. Let's take the next one from the Dory. Eric, this is a
So are there
question
any
for
plans
you.
to provide ODBC connectivity for docs and site scripts to have direct access using
There's an app
SDT?
scripts session this afternoon that I definitely recommend coming to. That's possible now, and we'll be spending a lot of time this year in beefing up app scripts and docs and sites integration. So the answer is yes, more detail later this afternoon.
He did link to a post that we just made that announces JDBC support for app scripts.
Yeah. So this afternoon, more detail.
3 o'clock.
So thanks guys for coming, especially thank you for waiting until lunch
Yeah, thank
to
you,
hear
everybody.
us talk.